Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. We have yet another video by Glaive Keo. They have been doing so good lately, and I was really interested in this video that was recommended to me. Uh, Essentially about the rise of Kuro games from end of service to the Game Awards. Now, I have been loving Wuthering Waves. Kuro has been doing a great job. So let's see how they went from zero to hero in this video.
Imagine working for years, pouring your soul into a dream, only to watch it crash and burn right in front of you. Most people would call it quits, but not the main character of today's video, Solon Lee. Instead of backing down, he doubled down, turning failure into fuel and a struggling studio into one of the biggest surprises, not just in gacha, but in gaming as a whole. Kuro Game.
Punishing Gray Raven has had a huge fan base, and Wuthering Waves is no exception to the fame that it has governed Kuro games. It has done nothing but boost their reputation after patch after patch after patch, especially after 2.0. Their name is everywhere. It's in everybody's mouth, no matter whether it's good or bad, whether it's Hoyo haters or Kuro bots. You know, it is what it is, and they've been doing a fantastic job. Gotta applaud them.
Games went from nobodies to headlining the Game Awards, from botch launches to breaking records, from barely scraping by to competing with billion-dollar giants. But this wasn't all luck. This wasn't some overnight success story. This was grit, risk, and pure stubbornness. So today we're diving into the wild rise of Kuro games, the failures, the disasters, the comebacks, and the insane decisions that turned them into the studio behind the award-winning, multi-million-dollar game, Wuthering Waves. Buckle up, because this is gonna be one hell of a story. First of all, who is the mastermind behind Kuro games? Who's the guy crazy enough to bet his entire career multiple times on making the games he wanted to see? That would be Lee Songlun, or his English name Solon Lee. And let's be clear, Solon isn't your typical corporate game executive. No overpriced suit.
He's an actual gamer. Who would have thought?
No fluff. He's just a guy from Guangdong who grew up obsessed with making cool things. As a kid, he wasn't thinking about climbing the corporate ladder, he was thinking about creating. His first step into the industry is not in some big groundbreaking role, but as a UI designer. That's right, the guy behind Wuthering Waves. He started out making sure buttons look nice. But here's...
You know, people don't give the UI designers enough credit. Honestly, if you could have the best product known to man on the computer, but if the UI is terrible, people won't even fuck with it, right? They will brush that to the side saying the UI is absolute trash. Or on the contrary, it could be the worst product, but if the UI looks dazzling, it looks interactive, it looks like something you could look at all day, people will flock to it just to try it out, just to see the UI, just to feel it, work with it. UI designers do not get enough credit, and I'll be the first one to say it. They need more credit. They need higher raise, honestly.
Here's the thing about Solon. People like him don't stay in the background for so long. Solon, so long. No, you don't get it. Even while designing UI, he wasn't just going through the motions. He had a bigger goal. He wasn't content with just contributing to someone else's project. He wanted to build something of his own. A game that wasn't just a product, but an experience. And as we'll see, that hunger to create, that refusal to settle, it's exactly what set him apart. It's why in 2014, he took the biggest risk of his life and founded Kuro Games. Starting a game studio in 2014 wasn't exactly a walk in the park, especially in China's cutthroat mobile gaming market. Solon didn't have a big corporate backing.
Yeah, if you weren't a part of Tencent, essentially, you're nothing. Tencent owes everything in China. If you had Tencent's backing, you were a multi-millionaire immediately.
Or safety net. Just a small team of 30, a lot of ambition, and enough funding from Buka Comics to get things off the ground. Now, if you know anything about the mobile gaming scene back then, you know it was completely oversaturated with anime-style gacha games.
I would think to say that they almost only produce mobile games at this point. Feels like every game they produce is a high quality mobile game that feels like it should be a AAA adventure game or something like that, but they add on things like gacha mechanics to keep it into the mobile sphere.
Move would have been to copy what was already making money, slap some new character designs on it, and call it a day. But that's not how Solon operates. From the start, he was determined to build something original, something that could stand on its own instead of just riding the wave of whatever was trending. Their debut game, Twin Tail Battleground, a 2D bullet hell shooter developed using the Cocos engine, and look, making a bullet hell shooter in a market obsessed with turn-based RPGs is already a bold move. But the real
that's
mistake,
crazy.
letting Morning Tech publish it. That decision would come back to haunt them in ways they couldn't even imagine. At launch, Twin Tail Battleground actually did well. More than well, it blew up. 1 million monthly active users, 187 million RMB in revenue. That's the kind of success that should have
That's
set
not
Kuro
bad,
Games
not
up for
bad.
the long haul. But then, here's where things start to fall apart. First, the monetization was aggressive, borderline brutal. The game was
Without a shadow of a doubt, every time something good happens in a game, it's always the monetization that creates the downfall. Good games are ruined by monetization 100% of the time. I monetization, people just get too greedy and they focus too much on, wow, people like the game, they've played it for 5 minutes, let's shove microtransactions down their throat and make them experience FOMO 2 days until the launch. It's ridiculous.
difficult, and instead of balancing it, they lean into the classic mobile game strategy. This boss fight is impossible unless you wail for better upgrades, and players hated that, obviously. On top of that, the market was shifting. Games like Honkai Impact 3rd, Onmyoji, and Fate Grand Order were pushing the industry into full 3D, leaving 2D games feeling outdated practically overnight. Twin Tail Battleground was starting to look like it was born at the wrong time. And the worst part is, Kuro Games didn't even own Twin Tail Battleground. Morning Tech held the publishing rights, meaning Kuro had zero control over how the game was handled, monetized, or updated.
Ooh, man, they got shafted on that. Having no kind of ownership over your own creation. This is people being devious, honestly backstabbing behavior.
They built it, but they didn't actually own it. And just like that, Twin Tail Battleground was shut down. Kuro's big success has become their first major failure. No backup plan, no safety net, just a harsh reality check. But here's the funny thing, players never forgot it. Even years later, the CN Wuthering Waves players still reference Twin Tail Battleground when polling for rare characters as a polling ritual. Probably something you should do too for your future polls. Maybe you'll get a 5-star early, who knows? But anyways, that failure hurt. But it taught Solon a crucial lesson. If you want real control over your vision, you have to own it. And that lesson would shape everything Kuro Games did next. After all of that, Solon had one clear takeaway. Never again. Never again would Kuro Games pour their blood, sweat, and tears into projects just to watch someone else pull the strings. From that moment forward, he made it a core principle. Kuro Games would control its own destiny. If they made a game, they had to be the ones keeping it alive. No middlemen, no outside publishers, just Kuro. Their
And they never needed him to begin with. Kuro said, I am him. I am the one. I don't need anybody. Psst, I'll publish my own game.
vision and their responsibility. But self-publishing wasn't just about cutting out the middleman, it meant figuring out what kind of game they wanted to make next. The team went back to the drawing board, analyzing the market, dissecting trends, and searching for something that could inspire their next big move. And then it happened. In 2017, Nier Automata hit the scene, and it was like a switch flip for Solon. Everything about it resonated. The post-apocalyptic themes, the fast-paced action combat, and the deeply emotional storytelling. It wasn't just a game, it was an experience. And for Solon, it was a blueprint. This was what he wanted Kuro Games to create. Not just another gacha game, but something immersive, something with weight, something that
revolutionary.
could make players feel. Armed with that inspiration, Kuro Games made the call. Their next project would be a full 3D action game. And remember, this was a massive risk at the time. They had never made a 3D game.
It's a big jump for a company that they first made is a 2D bullet hell to going into a 3D action game. That is this across the stratosphere of difference. And you know what? It was big risk, but it played off, Cotton.
before. Their entire history was in 2D, and now they were stepping into an arena dominated by giants like MiHoYo. Even the name was a statement. Punishing Gray Raven wasn't just a title, it was a nod to their history. The Chinese name directly referenced Twin Tail Battleground. This wasn't just their next game, it was their redemption arc. But wanting to make a 3D game and actually making one are two different things. Their old engine, Coco, simply couldn't handle what they wanted to build, so they scrapped it and moved to Unity. A powerful engine, but one they had little experience with. This wasn't just an artistic challenge, it was a technical one. They were learning as they went, figuring out 3D development from the ground up. And this wasn't just a new genre for them, it was an entirely new level of complexity.
That is some kind of dedication and commitment to scrap everything to go from, like I said, the 2D bullet hell to a 3D action game on a completely different engine. That is pure determination at its finest.
Games was known for 2D bullet hells. Now they were attempting to break into the high-speed, skill-based action RPG space, where expectations were sky high and competition was fierce. And if there was any doubt about his commitment, this was where he proved it. He wasn't just leading the company anymore, he personally stepped into the role of producer for Punishing Gray Raven. He wasn't watching from the sidelines, he was in the trenches, making sure the vision was executed exactly how he wanted it to be. This wasn't just about making a game, this was about proving that Kuro Games could stand on its own, and that Twin Tail Battleground was just the beginning. By this point, Kuro Games had ambition, vision, and a 3D action RPG in the works, but what they didn't have was funding. That changed when Punishing Gray Raven's early demo started making waves. The fluid combat, the crisp animations, the sheer near automata inspired energy, it was enough to get investors interested. Enter Hero Games.
All you need to get investors interested is just a little bit. Just focus on like 5 minutes of what you want, polished gameplay. Make sure it is crisp or at least shows a clear vision. And it's just up from there. You have to have something that looks good and that will actually draw people's attention, and they did it to a T.
They saw potential and decided to back Kuro Games, giving them the resources to bring PGR to life. But as anyone in the gaming industry knows, money can't fix everything. When the first closed beta rolled out in 2019, things looked promising until the servers immediately collapsed. And when Kuro Games rebooted them, they crashed again. It was a disaster. The demand was there, but their infrastructure couldn't handle it. Now, most developers would throw out a dry corporate apology, hand out some free in-game currency and call it a day, but Kuro Games, they had a unique approach. To make up for the disaster, Solon and Dong went on a stream and, brace yourself, cross-dressed as compensation. Yes, you heard that right, literal developers for the game in wigs and dresses, taking full responsibility for the server issues in most absurd way possible, cosplaying as the very popular Rem and Ram from ReZero. And shockingly, it worked. The community loved it. It turned frustration into laughter, and while it didn't fix the technical issues, it did prove one thing: Kuro Games knew how to take a hit and keep going. Little did they know this was just a warm-up act for
that. Has got to be the pinnacle of I'm sorry on the internet. I'd forgive him too, honestly. At least one time. If something kept fucking up, I'd probably drop him. But that would make me laugh enough to forgive
the real
100%.
Disaster. And then the launch day finally arrived. Hype was at its peak. Players flooded in, ready to experience Kuro Games' first ever 3D action RPG. And then, within hours, the servers went down again. It was closed beta 2.0, but worse, because this time, people had already spent money on the game. And just when things couldn't get any more chaotic, Kuro Games made a mistake. The kind of mistake that gets documented in game dev horror stories. They sent out compensation for the server issues. It was meant to be 1,000 premium currency, but they did a typo. The Kuro Games typo. What was the typo? It was 10,000 premium currency instead. And for reference, 10,000 premium currency is like 2 to 3 months worth of premium currency just dumped into.
Oh no. I'm sure everybody was super excited about that, but they can't roll that back after giving them that currency, because I know people spent that currency immediately, because there's people that cannot control themselves. So they were just done for at that point. They had to just kind of take that hit on the chin. They can't roll that back at all.
Everyone's accounts by accident. And in a gacha game, that is catastrophic. On launch day, by the way, because of the constant rollbacks, the player base lost it. The tap rating, previously solid, plummeted as angry reviews flooded in. It wasn't just about the
Wait, no, they did roll that back? That's crazy.
Stake itself, but how Kuro Games was handling the situation. The servers were still unstable. Players didn't know if they were allowed to keep the free currency. Some people are
Oh,
selling
no, they
accounts
didn't
having
yet.
thousands of premium currency in them. And worst of all, communication was rough. And on that same afternoon, Solon and Dong live stream an apology for the chaos. They bowed down and everything, and they're reading the chat of angry CN players, directly addressing problems and discuss solutions. And then came the infamous line. In the middle of all of this chaos, a furious chatter said, "Do you even see your players as human beings?" It was raw, it was dramatic, absolutely. Now at this point, most companies would either go radio.
You know, to be fair, all it was, the servers not holding up. It wasn't that they had a shit game. It wasn't that they weren't trying. You can only do so much in a short period of time of trying to get, your servers back up. I understand that. Uh, but I feel like that was taken a little too far. I mean, like I said, it's not like they made a bad game. They just weren't ready for the influx of people playing their game.
Silent, pretending they didn't read it, right? Or some Solon, still relatively unknown outside of Kuro's hardcore fans, immediately and personally responded. Now at the time, people mocked him for it. It came across as corporate damage control, like an attempt to put out a raging fire with a single glass of water. But in hindsight, that moment became something more. Because while Kuro Games was a mess in 2019, one thing became clear. They listened, and over time, that would make all the difference. If there is one thing we've learned from gaming companies, it's that they hate admitting fault. Most of them would rather let a game burn than acknowledge player feedback. But Kuro Games, they did the unthinkable. They actually listened. Now, every gacha game has that one official forum moderator, usually some faceless bot that copy-pastes pre-approved responses. Kuro Games, on the other hand, had Celica, not just an in-game character, but a dev account that actually responded to player complaints, sometimes even at 4 a.m. Imagine ranting about a broken mechanic in a random forum post at an ungodly.
They obviously they picked up somebody who just did not sleep at all. They're up at all hours of the day. They're like, all right, your one singular job is reply to people on social media. Make sure they know they're being heard by us. On it, boss. Doesn't sleep for a week straight.
And suddenly, Celica replies with, "Okay, we'll fix it." No PR team, no empty corporate statements, just straight up real-time engagement. It was bizarrely personal, almost unheard of in mobile gaming. And the crazy part, they didn't just pretend to listen, they actually acted on the feedback. There's some players complaining about stamina restrictions, and then some complain about the characters being too weak. They remove special weapon effects and incorporate them into players' skills as a buff. Some even said that paid skins didn't look good enough. They kept revising them from testing until release. Even in post-launch, they're still improving it. They weren't just tweaking numbers, they were reshaping the game to.
They're actually making their community be heard. It's crazy. It's
fit
amazing.
What players wanted. And slowly, the same people who mocked Solon's quote, "We see you as people," started believing it. It is easy to say that you care about your community, to say that you're listening, but Kuro Games actually proved it, and that is something rare about developers nowadays. When it comes to collaboration, Solon had one dream collaboration from day one. When asked who he would pick for a crossover, he didn't even hesitate. If we collaborate, our first pick must be Nier. And unlike most corporate pipe dreams, he meant it. Solon and his dream didn't just sit around hoping for an email, they made it happen. Kuro and Hero Games reached out to Square Enix, and Solon personally flew to Japan to meet Saito Yosuke, the producer of Nier. And get this, the man walked away with Saito's autograph. I mean, come on, that is not just business, that is a fan living out his fantasy. By June 2020, it was official. Punishing Grey Raven was getting its Nier collaboration. When the announcement dropped, Solon was like a kid on Christmas morning, showing off his signed memorabilia with the kind of glee that you would expect from a fan, not a CEO. But if you thought they would stop there, you don't know Kuro Games at all. By 2024, they would level up their game again, announcing a Devil May Cry 5 crossover with Capcom. From Dark Dystopias to Demon Hunters, Kuro was making moves. And with a team that is now 400 members strong, they are not just collaborating.
Not only Nier crossover, but a Devil May Cry crossover, that would put anyone on the map. That would literally put your game's name in everyone's mouth. That is such a huge array of audience. Honestly, congrats to them. Those are two huge crossovers.
They are expanding. It's not just about slapping a logo on some new skins, it is about building bridges with the biggest names in gaming. And let's be real, for a studio that was practically on life support a few years ago, that is a power move. By this point, one thing was clear. Kuro Games wasn't just making another gacha game, they wanted immersion. They wanted freedom. They weren't satisfied with flashy combat alone. They wanted to merge it with open world mechanics, something most gacha devs wouldn't even attempt because how complex it is. But here's the problem. Pulling off a fully open world action RPG isn't just difficult, it's insanely ambitious, especially for a studio that not too long ago was fumbling launch servers and accidentally handing out 10,000 premium currency. Even within
zero
Kuro
to hero,
Games,
man.
some devs
Zero to
doubted
hero.
whether they could actually do it. This wasn't just a new game, it was an entirely new genre for them. And then came the biggest risk. Kuro Games ditched Unity and switched to Unreal Engine 4. This was a massive
that's a
deal.
big
They
jump.
had just spent years mastering Unity for punishing Grey Raven, and now they were throwing out that experience out the window. Unreal Engine gave them more freedom, better visuals, and the potential for a larger, more immersive world. But it also meant starting over from scratch. To
They really
make it
meant to
work,
go
Kuro
big or
Games
go
had
home.
to restructure their entire development process. Artists, programmers, designers, everyone had to relearn how to work in a completely different engine.
I know they all had to relearn everything, but they really feel like they are the team that can do it. They really don't feel like it's holding them back. I feel like them learning engine after engine is only making them better. It's creating experience. It's really showing the technical prowess that their team has and how dedicated they are to making games as good as they are.
It wasn't just a game development shift, it was a company-wide evolution. And at that moment, Kuro Games went from being a niche mobile developer to something much bigger. They weren't just trying to compete with industry giants, they were coming for them. When people think about game development, they think devs sitting in the dark rooms, programming and coding away, fueled by caffeine and bad decisions. And while that's not
That's most of
entirely
them.
wrong, what happened at Kuro Games was way worse. For 14 months, the team was stuck in an endless cycle of trial and error. They had talent shortages, constant technical issues, and no clear roadmap to escape development hell. Fixing one problem just created 5 more. They fixed the problem and suddenly there's floating characters. And when they fix that, there's suddenly collision issues. And when they fix that, there's rendering glitches. Imagine trying to develop a game, but every time you fix something, it breaks in an even dumber way.
That's
and this wasn't
coding
just
for
some
you in a
experimental
nutshell.
indie project anymore. Kuro Games had billions invested in this over 3 years. This wasn't just about making a great game, it was about survival. By 2022, the project was in crisis mode. The game existed, but it was far from what Kuro envisioned. The rendering was mediocre at best, the character models were unpolished, the script was a total mess, and the worst part, the script writing controversy, internal disputes over narrative direction, tanked
translating's
morale.
always
And at
gonna
one
be an
point,
issue,
some
I
devs
swear.
genuinely thought the game wouldn't make it to release. But there's one silver lining. Big corporations started noticing, and when that happens, money follows. If there is one thing Tencent loves, it is sniffing out potential blockbusters. They saw the struggle, the ambition, and most importantly, the potential. So in 2023, they dropped billions into Kuro Games, giving them not just the funding, but access to high-end resources and technical expertise.
What I tell you, Tencent is the do or die in the community. And guess what? Kuro was about to die, and Tencent said, "Here, let me shower my generosity over you. Let me show you what you can be." And just dumped buckets and buckets and truckloads of money on them. And now we have Wuwa.
Impact was immediate. Kuro Games scaled up operations like never before. The developer team ballooned to over 500 people. They moved to the Xiaomi Tower, one of the most prestigious corporate locations in Guangzhou. This wasn't some scrappy indie studio anymore. This was a serious industry player. But money alone doesn't make a good game. We all know that by now, right? Kuro had to fix what was broken. So they did. 80% of the story was rewritten. They went back to the drawing board to make sure the narrative actually worked. Character models got a complete overhaul. Gone were the stiff, outdated designs. And this time they aimed for a AAA quality game.
Yeah,
and
that's what
then
I'm talking
came the
about.
marketing blitz. Kuro Games wasn't just launching a game, they were making a statement. 30 million pre-registrations before launch, ads everywhere, Times Square, Akihabara, major Chinese cities. They wanted everyone to know that Wuthering Waves wasn't just another gacha game, it was the next big thing. But here's the problem. With massive investments come even bigger expectations. People weren't looking at Kuro Games like an underdog anymore.
Yeah, now we're getting to the harsh reality. The harsh release of Wuthering Waves.
They were treating them like a potential giant, a studio that could challenge the biggest names in the industry. And if history has taught us anything, it's that when the stakes are this high, failure is not an option. But you already know what happened, right? It wasn't just bad, it was the kind of launch that makes investors sweat, players rage, and developers question their life.
I will say, even though their launch was bad, I feel like it really gave a lot of hope and positivity to community. Now, stay with me. Because the launch was so bad, how they reacted to the launch, how they showed their player base that they were actually sorry with all the free currency, with the 5-star selectors and everything like that. It gave hope that they knew what they did and that they hope to make it better and hope to mend things with their community. And I think because the community was shown that they like they care for us as consumers so much that they're willing to give us all this free stuff to keep us going, be like, hey, just give us a little bit more time and we'll show you what this game could be. I feel like it really created a very instantaneous connection between Kuro and their customers.
Life
My
choices.
opinion.
If Punishing Grey Raven had a rough start, Wuthering Waves looked like it was speedrunning the same mistakes, but on hard
Absolutely.
mode. At this point, Kuro Games might as well have a passive ability called Against All Odds, because every time they release a game, the universe decides to test their resilience. Let's go down the list. Script writing disaster, check. The story was so confusing that even the internet turned it into a meme.
It was
Literally
terrible.
everyone was talking about it. In the JP side, nobody can read the names because the kanji was too hard to understand. In the English side, they hated the voice acting because everything seems out of place, and nobody seems like they know what they're doing. And in the CN side, they said it was boring. There were bugs, crashes, frame drops. In PC, mobile, it didn't matter. The game ran like it was Hoyoverse running from accountability. Some people said that the world was stunning, but it felt empty, with vast areas lacking meaningful landmarks or points of interest. The music, they said the music was bad as well. Public backlash was brutal. The game's tap rating plummeted to 5.3, which in gacha terms in CN is basically a funeral. Players joke that Kuro Games must have forgotten to check the calendar before launching, because there's no way that this game was ready. The real question became, was this just another gacha game fumble, or was Kuro Games about to crash and burn completely? Now, when things go south in the gaming industry, especially in the gacha game genre, you usually get one of these two responses. The developers go completely silent, hoping the rage dies down, or they will throw out some generic apology, promise long-term improvements, give you a glider or something, and move on. Kuro Games, they chose option 3, show up, take the heat, and fix everything. In a moment that surprised everyone, Solon personally appeared at the TapTap developer interview, exhausted. He literally looked like he hasn't slept for a week, but dead set on turning things around. He didn't sugarcoat anything. No corporate speak, no vague promises, just a brutal reality check. He said the game was a technical mess. The story needed an overhaul. Support tickets were piling up at an insane rate. But here's the difference. He didn't just admit the problems, he had a plan. This wasn't going to be a slow, drawn-out redemption arc. Kuro went to war with the game's problems.
They fixed everything pretty fast, if I'm to say so myself.
Solon personally monitored player feedback, directly engaging with criticism instead of hiding from it. The dev team went full crunch mode, dropping patches, optimizations, and bug fixes at record speed. By version 1.1, things actually started to turn around. Performance improved, content felt more refined, and the game wasn't actively trying to crash on your device anymore. And little bit by bit, Wuthering Waves clawed its way back from the brink. But this wasn't just a case of fixing the problems. It was a fundamental shift in how Kuro Games approached game design. Solon remarked, if a player only has 3 minutes a day to play Wuthering Waves, then those 3 minutes should be high quality experience. And that really just speaks for itself. By version 2.0, they had finally delivered what they set out to create, a game that could stand toe-to-toe with the best in the genre. Heck, some people even called it a AAA game. And the crazy part, this is...
Let's be real. Wuthering Waves is honestly a huge AAA game. Let's be real here. The amount of effort they put into this game is beyond what actually some AAA games put out now.
And even the peak. Kuro Games has been learning, and if history tells us anything, it's that when they bounce back, they come back stronger than ever. At first, Unreal Engine looked like a disaster waiting to happen. Kuro Games took the leap from Unity to Unreal Engine 4, thinking it would be future-proof for Wuthering Waves. But early on, it was a nightmare. The game ran terribly on mobile, which, let's be real, it's a death sentence for a gacha game. The optimization was so bad that many players just went in frustration, refusing to deal with the crashes and frame drops. And for a while, it looked like Kuro had made a huge mistake. mistake. But here's where they did something most developers wouldn't. They didn't backpedal. Instead of scrambling to downgrade or make excuses, they doubled down, spending 6 months refining the game until Unreal Engine's full potential could shine. By version 2.0, the payoff was undeniable. Once Kuro ironed out the kinks, Wuthering Waves became a technical powerhouse. Stunning visuals far beyond what most gacha games offer. 120 FPS support, making combat feel buttery smooth. In the end, Solan's gamble paid off. The game that once looked like it was doomed by its own ambition became a technical flex, proving that Kuro wasn't just here to compete. They were here to push the genre forward. After everything, the disastrous launch, the brutal criticism, the months of non-stop fixes, what does Kuro Games have to show for it? Solan's answer? As long as Wuthering Waves lives on, it is all good. Wuthering Waves lived on, and we've already made back our investment. Not exactly a Hollywood ending, but in the gacha industry, survival is half the battle. So what now? Kuro's next move isn't just about maintaining Wuthering Waves, it's about evolving with its players. They're betting on player-driven content, integrating direct feedback into future updates.
I think they're doing
give
a
us surveys
fantastic
every
job
time.
at it.
Your input isn't just heard, it's implemented. The community is actively influencing the game's direction, something almost unheard of in the space dominated by corporate decision-making. Bigger player base equals more criticism. And with this growth comes more criticism, more expectations, more scrutiny. But you know what? That is a good thing. If people didn't care, they wouldn't bother complaining. At the end of the day, Wuthering Waves doesn't just belong.
Your biggest fans are also your biggest haters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
To Kuro anymore. It belongs to the players, the ones who stuck around, the ones who demanded better, and the ones who believed that this game could be something great. This isn't just another gacha game clawing for relevance. This is a game that fought for its place and won. When Kuro Games first started, they were just a small, unknown studio trying to break into an industry that had no room for them. They had no publishing control, no proven track record, and no guarantee of survival. The failure of Twin Tail Battleground should have been the end. Most studios in their position would have been folded, but Kuro didn't quit. Instead, they learned. Punishing Grey Raven was their second shot.
They really sat there and said, nah, I'd win.
And they almost blew it with a disastrous launch. But instead of giving up, they adapted. They rebuilt trust with their players, fixed the game, and turned failure into loyalty. And then came Wuthering Waves, their biggest, most ambitious project ever. It flopped at launch. Again. But here's the difference. This time, Kuro knew how to fight back. They poured everything into fixing the game, refining Unreal Engine, overhauling the story, and actually listening to the players. It took time, but by version 2.0, the game that once looked like a public train wreck became a serious contender in the gacha space. And now, Wuthering Waves isn't just another gacha game. It's a statement, a proof of concept that smaller studios don't have to bow into industry giants, that player feedback actually matters, and that games can improve if developers are willing to fight for them. Kuro Games started as underdogs. They took risks that should have destroyed them. They made mistakes that should have killed their momentum, but instead of dying, they evolved. And that is why Kuro Games won. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you in.
Now, that was a fantastic video, and honestly, Kuro Games deserves all the praise that they get nowadays, because going through all that, going through a huge first game failure, a huge second game launch failure, and a third launch game failure, is crazy that they bounce back from all of that. They honestly have a lot more determination than most other companies, because I feel like if Hoyoverse was in that same position, they wouldn't be able to bounce back like that. But they really had the people that with the know-how, they had the people with the determination, and honestly, more power to them. I cannot wait to see the future of Wuthering Waves. Thank you all for watching, and don't forget to like them, like and subscribe to Glaive, and have a good one. Peace.